So I've done some videos in the last few days that have gotten more views than normal, and I've gotten a few emails from people asking me, what is my personal journey with the men's rights movement? Why did I become an MRA and why did I become a men's rights activist? And what does being a men's rights activist mean to me? Well, it started in high school, really around the age of 16, 17 years old, is when I really kind of started to notice that there were some things missing from the conversation of gender equality. You would always hear about feminism, but you would never really hear about men or boys. And I remember the two first things I noticed was circumcision was one of the big things that I learned. That, wait a minute, we mutilate baby boys when they're born for basically no reason. And then the second one was seeing just how many more scholarships, or just rather how many more scholarships for girls, but really how many less scholarships for boys were available. So I would talk to my female classmates that had the same grades, the same GPA, same more or less basic record, and they would have much more scholarships available. And that was kind of the very first thing that kind of led me on to looking into things. And then I saw the education gap. Boys are less likely to graduate, boys are less likely to go to college, and men are more likely to be unemployed, men are more likely to be homeless, and it just kind of went on from there. And then I started learning things like conscription in many countries, even so-called progressive, equal, Western, developed liberal countries like Austria, like Finland, like Norway, countries that have male-only conscription, although Norway is gender equal now. And then I remember learning about things like pension ages, countries that have higher pension ages for men. Again, Western liberal European countries that are supposed to be progressive and that you always hear are high on the list of gender equality, such as the UK at the time, such as Italy, such as Switzerland. And I realized there's this whole big issue where men and boys are being discriminated against and men and boys are being left behind, but you don't see that talked about at all in the conversation about gender equality. And I would see all these countries on the top 5, top 10 lists of most gender equal countries. But wait a minute, these countries blatantly discriminate against men. How can they possibly be the top 5, top 10 most equal countries in the world if they blatantly discriminate against men? And that's when I began to learn the reality. Sexism against men, discrimination against men, and men's issues just don't count. And people don't talk about them when they talk about gender equality, except for one group of people, MRAs. And that kind of led me to talking to MRAs and feminists. And I gotta tell you, the reason why I'm an anti-feminist is not because I go on these blogs and I read things about feminism and I get brainwashed. The reason why I'm an anti-feminist is because I talk to feminists. And the more I would start talking to MRAs and feminists about these issues, and the more I would ask questions, the more I realized that feminists really had no interest in equality whatsoever, but they had a very arrogant, entitled attitude towards talking about men's issues as if they owned the conversation. Whereas I found MRAs were much more reasonable and rational and fair-minded. And I know that those words may sound kind of harsh, and I know that may be kind of going against the philosophy of my very, very first video, trying to find peace and middle ground between feminists and MRAs. But I gotta tell you, that video is now pushing 4 years old, and I gotta say, the more I talk to feminists, kind of the worse it gets. But let's not make this video about feminism. The reason why I became an MRA is because I saw there are all of these issues affecting men and boys around the world. All different countries, all different laws. Men are discriminated against in different ways, and there are social gaps and political gaps and economic gaps where men and boys are behind. And really no one seemed to be talking about them, except for MRAs. And so I became a men's rights activist. And 13 years later, I don't regret it.